Hi there, this is Leon Alexander, and you are listening to the Liverpool Connection Podcast, music and football episodes. Enjoy.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Liverpool Connection Podcast. This is my music and football and more episode where I bring on a DJ, producer, musician to talk about music and football and a little bit more lately, because there's more to the guest than just music and football. There's life that takes up most of our time. Today's guest is label boss of Hope Recordings, which is home to Starecase, Timo Maas, Mad Dogs, Ian Wilkie, Max Graham, so many great artists. And he's a DJ, he's a producer, he's an artist manager at Red Light Management. I welcome Leon Alexander to the podcast. It's great to have you. I just can't wait to get into it with you. Again, as people know who know me, I'm a massive music fan, and Hope Recordings for me, in the 90s, early 2000s, was always played. It was always in my record box. And that's so weird to say now, Leon, a record box, when today it's just a USB. It's a lot easier on the old back. You don't have to go through a field with two record boxes.
Well, we used to say we used to get paid for carrying the records. That's what we were paid for.
Yeah,
we didn't get paid for playing them. We got paid for carrying them, basically.
Yeah, it's one of those where it still boggles my mind, where you just you go to a gig and you just have this little USB stick.
Yeah.
Thousands of hours of music. Before I go on, I do want to let the listeners know that Leon used to have a podcast, and I really wish you would have carried that podcast on, because
it's funny that I did, because I did it during COVID. I did 12 episodes, and you hitting me up reminded me that I'd done it, because I sort of forgotten. And I was chatting to Ian Wilkie today, weirdly enough. And I'm going to try and do another season at some point. There was more time over COVID, basically, wasn't there? So, and I also started a radio show with my eldest son on a station here in Bristol at the same time, and then that evolved into the podcast. But I did 12 with them: Adam Freeland and Frank Wiedemann and DJ Crust and MC Cheekaboo and Nick Warren, obviously, and Mr. Wilkie and a whole bunch of others. And I think I've got a second season in me, because there's a bunch of people I haven't done that I should do. Not least of all Timo. Timo and I haven't really spoken in 20 years.
Oh, wow.
So we should probably go over that and have a chat. And then I thought, well, if we're going to do that, then maybe I should, So there's a kind of I'm going to get there at some point relatively shortly and do another season, because they were real fun to do, and I just put them up on SoundCloud mainly. That's where it seemed to work the best for me. But yeah, it was good. It was good.
Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed him. I listened to him quite a few years ago, and then I got reintroduced to the Adam Freeland one.
Yeah,
Adam's such a down to earth lad. Like, he's hard to get a hold of. Obviously, he lives off the grid still.
Yeah.
He comes out when he feels like it. He just played Balance in Croatia.
Yeah.
And it was just fascinating to listen to both of you. If anyone wants to check it out, it's called Unintentional
Conversations. And it's on my SoundCloud, which is obviously Leon Alexander.
Yeah, it's just nice. It's refreshing, because I being in the little podcast business, you kind of listen to other people's podcasts. One, to make sure that you're kind of doing your own thing, and two, to kind of not steal, but just to listen,
be influenced by.
Yeah, to listen to people, how they react to a guest.
Yeah. Yeah.
I listen to Chris Hawkins' How to DJ, which is a fantastic podcast as well.
I haven't heard that.
It's a good flow. And I have to say, your conversations are just it's so refreshing to hear, mate. Just because
Oh, thank you.
a lot of podcasts, I'll always say this, try and make it about themselves, like the host.
Right. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't understand that. I've never understood that.
No.
The whole reason why you have a guest is to listen to them, not
Yeah.
not butt in
Yeah.
all the time or answer, ask the guest a question, and then before they've answered it, you've answered that question for them. So, like I say, when I come across like podcasts I'll push them. It's not like a competition for me. It's one of those where I'd love to have Adam on, just because he's a fascinating fella.
Yeah.
I loved his coastal breaks. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I loved it, the acid, just absolutely brilliant. And then listening to you two was like, I put the headphones on yesterday. I was like, and I'd heard it before, but then
Yeah.
I caught more things that I missed the first time. So it was kind of like, that full 360. And it was like, yeah, I like
Oh,
this.
cool.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about your roots in music and your early influences. What was playing in your household as a kid?
Opera, Puccini mainly, I think, and Wagner. My dad listened to opera, so opera became the only genre of music that I actively disliked, probably until about 5 years ago, when the penny suddenly dropped. Um, so that's what my dad was just. That's what he listened to. So um, I got into music. I got into music when Elvis died because I didn't know who he was, and then obviously all three TV channels we had were showing all his movies, and Radio One that I was listening to was playing a lot of Elvis, and then I sort of got into Elvis, and then got into 50s America stuff, then got into 60s America stuff, and psychedelic stuff. Really got into Hawkwind, that kind of thing. Um, I'm not I'm not as young as I look, so by the time Acid House happened, and it took a while to get to Bristol, so it wasn't immediate. So let's say 88. I was already 22, which I got. The 80s were amazing because every 6 months a new genre would arrive. Hip hop, electro, hair metal, whatever, new wave, and I loved all of it. So I just kind of went to, I just every 6 months I got into something new. And by the time Acid House happened, it was probably 89. I think I started going to parties in Bristol, so I was 22, 23 already. Um, and it's a massive cliche, but in this case, it is 100% true that music was all I had. That's what held me together. I fucked school. That wasn't the thing. And my life was a bit of a car crash, and all I had was music. So I just kind of bounced around different things. I didn't like Acid House when it started because I really got into music through the lyrics. I was a big lyric guy. Um, and lyrics were really important to me because that's how I connected to music. So I really struggled with instrumental music, full stop. Um, and so I started going to acid house parties, and I liked the vibe party. And I was completely straight. I wasn't drinking or doing anything else. And I used to go on my own to these things, just get lost in them. And I used to like the parties, but I still didn't quite understand the music as a standalone thing. I couldn't sit down and listen to it. I couldn't really get my head around that. And I was in a band, and that band fell apart, didn't really work. Um, by this time, I'm like early 20s, skint basically, no idea what to do, what was going on, how to do anything. I'd failed as a singer in a band, um, but everyone I was hanging out with was musical in some capacity. Um, I got together with this guy. We did a thing called One Love Foundation. So we released a couple of singles that did well. Um, Certainly in terms of press, like Face and ID and Mixmag and that sort of thing. And it was just after Blue Lines, and it was of a similar vibe. Um, and so we started doing parties as well. And we hooked up with another guy, and we started doing parties called One Love Foundation, which were essentially like mini raves, hardcore events in sort of clubs and stuff in Bristol. Um, and that escalated pretty quick. We sort of fell out. One Love continued as a party brand in the Southwest, became a really big party brand. They dropped the foundation, just became One Love. Me and the other guy started something else, which was a kind of techno-y, trancey hybrid called Tokyo Sex Whale, which was a solid event. But even then, I was kind of always on the outskirts, never really in the sort of central point of it. Um, and then eventually, with a bunch of other people, I started on that called Shimmy. And what the sound we played was sort of German Frankfurt trance. That's what I played. So it's like 150 BPM, screaming, sort of, Superstition records, Rising High records, that kind of thing. And off the back of that, I then got the job at Lakota. And at that point, the Lakota, the owners of Lakota and the previous promoter had fallen out. And a lot of the big DJs wouldn't play Lakota. See Sasha's, Digweed's, Carl. They kind of boycotted it. And so I decided the only way I was going to get around that was just to play to my strengths. So I just booked a load of German trance DJs. And on my first day, I was tidying up the office, and there was a 10-inch record on the floor. In fact, the chair I was sat on was on top of it. And because it was German, I'm half German, right? Just for context, I was born in Germany, brought up bilingually. So I've always had a sort of warm feeling towards the sort of Germanic side. So I took this 10-inch home, and it was Timo Maas and Gary Didi Herdplatte, which is an absolute scorching trance monster. I took it home, played it, phoned the number on it, and it was Timo, and I started to book him. And from that moment on, things began to kind of gel. From that moment on, things started to kind of make sense. And people loved him here in Bristol. And then Carl started to come back, and so we started. I ran this Night Temptation, which was essentially like I always wanted a middle ground. I didn't want a techno night. I didn't want a trance night. I wanted something in the middle, but there were breaks in there. We did the drum and bass back room to Ronnie and everyone to come down. It was just that kind of mishmash of everything, and that's where we lived. And so those were my kind of musical. I think all those years of hopping from one genre to the next and doing everything and having 28 different haircuts in the space of 8 years, and just wanting to be involved in the next phase of whatever was happening, influenced that sort of collage vibe of what I was trying to do and how and so by the time the Lakota kind of got back on its feet quite quickly, and we had a really solid 3 years there.
Well, I mean, it just seems like Bristol was such a mecca for music. Obviously, Portishead, Massive Attack.
There was a point in Bristol from about, obviously, when Blue Lines happened, which was much sooner than that. Let's say, I don't know, 91 or something, wasn't it? But that kickstarted it. But there was a point in Bristol, probably about 93 to 98, 99, where Bristol was on fire. It was absolutely on fire. And it's smaller than it is now. And really, everybody kind of knew each other enough to say hello to each other in the pubs, kind of thing. And we all could sense that it was just blazing, and whatever direction we were going in, the drum and bass thing, or the breaks thing, or everyone was just blazing, and it was really working. It was brilliant.
Yeah, it just seemed like everything that was coming out of Bristol at the time was just, it was forward thinking music.
Yeah.
I mean, with breaks, stuff that was coming out of Bristol was definitely, very bass heavy. and even had some rock elements in it as well.
Yeah.
That just again, for me as a avid music listener, I was looking for the next thing, not the next big thing, but the next
Just
underground.
the next thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everything that was just I was hearing from Bristol, I was like, I want more of
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
because it was different. Obviously Liverpool, you got your Scouse House at the time, and that just wasn't for me. It's like handbag music.
Yeah.
Don't like that kind of like house music. So I was always looking for something different, and I love me drum and bass. I love me breaks. I love me techno. But again, it has to be emotional for me,
Yeah.
just to
Yeah.
move.
Yeah.
That's why, again, I
That's a
can't.
good way of putting it. I think the emotionality of it is important, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you have music for me has to create a feeling, whether it's happy
Yeah.
or makes you not makes you sad, but if you're like melancholy, I'll
Yeah.
listen to the Smiths. That's
Yeah.
what you
Yeah.
do. If you
Yeah.
want, something poppy, you listen to something poppy. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
music just has to move me in a certain
And the
way.
thing is now, that's how kids listen to music because it's all presented to them, obviously on DSPs, and they can choose whatever they like. But for us, that's not how it worked. And everyone kind of had their tribes. And I was never part of a tribe. And I think Bristol, there's 1,000 documentaries on why Bristol was like it was, and who knows? And I don't know. But my perspective is that um, it wasn't big enough to have tribes like that, and so it was quite small and active. So there was always crossover from different cultures and different music. But also, it didn't have a history. We had no history. Like Liverpool had so much musical history. Bristol didn't have any musical history in that sense, other than the Wurzels. So we were kind of starting with a clean slate. I mean, we didn't think about it like that, but that's the reality of it. I think there was just a clean slate. And once Massive had done what they'd done, and they were still in the pub, they hadn't moved to New York or whatever. They were, they do all them huge achievements, and then you still see them in the pub. And I still live in the same area now that I lived in then, and I've always lived in. And literally, when I talk about the pub, it's about a 10-minute walk from here. It's not a pub anymore; it's an Airbnb, obviously. But that's um, you bump into these people, and you realise you could do this thing. You didn't really understand how they were doing this thing, but like, well, if they can do it, I'm sure I can have a crack at it myself and build my own version of it.
Well, everyone was looking towards Bristol, I think, back then as well. And, it just offered something completely different.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
for me, being a Northwest lad, it just opened my musical earbuds up to, something I'd really not really. I mean, I'm a hip hop fan as well. So the trip hop kind of thing was more lyrical.
mm,
Obviously, Massive Attack and Portishead, just the lyrics just shook me. And Jeff Barrow is an amazing, arranger.
hmm
And I've had the pleasure to talk to Andy Smith, who was their tour DJ,
hmm
just to, get some insight of how they worked, in the studio. And it's just always great to kind of get that little fly on the wall detail on how they went about making music. I mean, for you, when was the first time like you were like, I want to start making music?
Um, well, I'd always wanted to start making music, but I didn't have the talent. And in reality, almost all the music that I made, certainly all the music I made that ever got released, I never made alone, and I made mainly with Martin Butterisch. I don't know if you're aware of Martin. I'm sure you are, Manual Detail. Martin Butterisch is a phenomenal producer, lives in LA now. Um, but he was the driving heart and engine of the whole Timo Maas sound, and he was the driving heart and engine of this world because he was a hip hop kid and he was a stoner, and he'd kind of been dragged into this techno world, and then he brought this mentality with him, and he was really good at. He was a phenomenal engineer, and you say to him, "I just want this thing that sort of sounds like that, and then does that." and then you go and do it. So I don't want to, I'm not going to take any credit for being a producer at all, um, because I wasn't. I had some ideas, um, and some of the stuff that I executed as well were ideas that came from Martin and Timo. Um, uh, and Eels, who was half Staircase, he had a similar sort of way of just being really on it and being able to deliver whatever was in someone else's head. Um, Obviously, I've been involved in songwriting with the band, but that was very lyrical focused because writing lyrics and poetry and stuff is something I did from the age of like 15 and just kept writing and writing. But the musical writing stuff, there was no way I could do that on my own. And I remember being in a studio when we were in One Love Foundation trying to get someone to explain Cubase to me, which was the software we all used in those days. Um, and I couldn't really get my head around it.
I mean, that's why, engineers get paid quite a bit of money.
Yeah,
That's the thing too, Leon. Goldie is a prime example of he's got so much in his head, but he
yeah,
needs somebody else to pull it out. And
yeah,
that's why you have, I mean, for me, Justin Drake, Peace Division, is one of the best engineers out there.
yeah.
Um, and there are so well. Let me ask you this question then.
Go on then.
Because there's a difference, I think, when you have an input of you've got something in your mind that you don't know Cubase, you don't know Logic, you don't know how to put it all
Yeah,
down, able to,
yeah,
but you have a mate who's an engineer, and he
yeah,
makes it ideas. Then you have the engineer who just gets, the ghostwriter syndrome, where this artist has no input but just gets a engineer to ghostwrite the tracks. What's your thoughts on that? Because I have my own thoughts on it, and I'd like to hear kind of your thoughts
I
on.
mean, I don't have a problem with it. It really, I mean, I think the problem only exists in the discrepancy between if it's a big name artist, what the big name artist is getting paid versus what the engineer is getting paid. But if you take the money out of it, I don't have a problem with it conceptually at all. I mean, there's books being written by all sorts of people all the time. I think, no, it's not something I have a problem with. And I say it's not something I have a problem with because one of the best remixes I ever did, and I can't remember the track was called. Yeah, I don't recall now. But I remember feeling weird about it. But one of the best remixes I did whilst I was on a plane to somewhere else. I wasn't in the studio. Martin just did it for me because he kind of knew what I wanted to do. If you see what I mean? So he kind of knew. Well, Leon just do that. So he went away and did it. And then he sent it to me and said, "Do you like it?" And I said, "Yes." And it still had my name on it. So it'd be hypocritical of me to have any other opinion other than that, really.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's two ways about it. I just, I just feel sometimes, especially now, there are a lot of ghost producers and slapping somebody's name on it,
Yeah,
and I just feel like that engineer, well, him or her are getting paid, to do their job, and but the so-called artist is just for me. I come from a background, I'm a big Jam, The Clash fan, and
right.
they work their socks off on the lyrics, on the melodies and everything,
Yeah,
and then it just to be told, like, some lad popped his head in the studio and went, yeah, that's good.
yeah.
Buggered
I
off.
mean, but if you look at pop music, I mean, how many writers are on pop tracks nowadays? I mean, everything's a factory, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, I don't, yeah, I don't feel there's a benefit to having an opinion on it, if I'm honest. I think it is what it is. And if people don't like it, they should go and do their own thing. And there's a lot of bands and musicians that are 100% doing that. Um, and therefore they have an authenticity and a validity that maybe other acts don't have. And they work the music in a different way and they approach it in a different way and are perceived in a different way. I don't know, you'd never get Radiohead or whatever to do it like that, and therefore that radio, whatever they're doing, is very authentic and real. You can't compare Radiohead to. I'm going to run out of metaphors in a minute or analogies, and then you can't compare I don't know, to Radiohead to Taylor Swift, because they're a different thing. It's a different structure, even though it's still people on stage singing and making music. The structure behind it is very different. The end goal is very different. They're just two very different things, aren't they?
Well, I mean,
And
you got to think, Leon, too, like the 80s stock, Aiken and Waterman, pretty
yeah,
much engineered, produced. So, Rick Astley, Dead or Alive, every pop tune
yeah,
pretty much came through their like station, so they
yeah,
churned it
yeah,
out.
totally. And they engineered that world, and because they were kind of first in line with that to a degree, they sort of became stars themselves, didn't they? But you go and see I don't know, go and see the London Philharmonic. No one on that stage has written anything, and the conductor certainly, isn't even playing anything. But they're all getting lauded, and quite rightly so. So I think the discrepancies in the finances, especially in dance music, especially in dance music, where you're not getting the money off the sales, and therefore the people that are writing it aren't getting much or anything possibly.
Yeah, that's why I always say Bandcamp, 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 because
Yeah,
most of the money goes to the artist. Um, you know, we can have a whole new episode about just Spotify and how much that takes from the artist. It's wrong because, again, the artist is the one that makes the music, writes the lyrics most of it,
yeah,
and they get, whatever they get is just doesn't seem enough. Especially, as they say, starving musicians, that
yeah.
will play on the street just to make.
Well, the other issue is that supply has outstripped demand.
Mhm.
That's the biggest issue. Because when we were younger, when new music happened, it was just the most exciting thing, and we'd fucking travel 3 hours to go to massive records to buy vinyl, or can't wait for that album to come out. And obviously, that culture doesn't exist anymore. So, it does exist, but in different ways, potentially. I've got three teenage boys, so I can see how excited they're getting about music. But ultimately, there's just too much of it, and there isn't enough people to engage with it, and that's where the financial model kind of breaks, because there's always more. There's always more. It was a finite quantity when we were younger. The new record would come out, and your mate would have it, and you all go around your mate's house all night and listen to it once a week, and that'd be that. But obviously, I'm keen not to sound like an old man, even though I am, but because I encourage change, and it's fruitless to sit and complain about the way the world is, because no one gives a fuck. I'm not talking about politics here. I'm talking about the music business, um, because it is what it is, and you either have to accept that's what it is, and have to work with those constraints. When we were trying to break records and break bands 20, 30 years ago, it was a really simple formula. Can you get it on the radio? Because if the answer is no, then it's done. It ain't going anywhere. And obviously those radio gatekeepers were, very few people who had all that power. So you can argue that power's gone. And I know a lot of young acts that are making a decent living, through pushing their music in themselves and through TikTok and, those things. It's been incredible the way, and all of that has come from dance music. All of that has come from that DIY ethos of, I'm going to run a record label from my bedroom, which is exactly what Hope was. Um, and I can make a living out of it. And it wouldn't originate from there. You can go all the way back to punk, etc., and indie. Different.
Well, it's oversaturated, isn't it?
And it is oversaturated, but people are still breaking through. It's just different, harder. Yeah, hard to tell.
Well, thousands upon thousands of records get released, on Beatport and Juno, every single day. And,
Yeah,
stuff that we listen to will fall through the cracks. And it's a cracking record, but it's just not getting radio play. It's not getting,
yeah.
because of social media as well. Maybe they just don't have a social media presence, and that's what you need.
Well, because when we were younger, it was about the audio, and it isn't about the audio anymore exclusively. It's about the visual and it's an audio visual thing now. So, you have a record that sounds amazing, but unless there's visuals to catch people's attention or other stuff that needs to go with it, it will just fall through the cracks.
Hmm.
And it depends what you're trying to achieve with that record, and it's yeah. I mean, it kind of works both ways because there are I can see people making living out music all the time who are embracing the new paradigm, but there are definitely people who have struggled because they're coming from an older paradigm. So I think the people that are being really successful with it are really young and don't remember what the old paradigm looked like or have no idea, and therefore they just think, "Oh, this is how it is," and so I'm going to go and do it, and it really works for them.
Well, I mean, it's the viral hit, isn't it? If you get a viral
Yeah,
hit.
to a degree, I think people, young rappers and stuff as well, especially, using YouTube, building up their YouTube channel to like a couple of million subscribers from scratch, out of the back of the mum's kitchen, um, and breaking like that. I mean, it's fascinating. Um, it's amazing to see. And my 13-year-old is my youngest, just the stuff he's into, the way he listens to music and where he comes across music and where he hears it and how he engages with it. It's just very different to the way that we did it. And well, I'm quite rightly so. Tony Wilson, as we all know, was a genius. I mean, I never really met him. He might have been hard work to get on with. I remember he said, I'm paraphrasing completely. I should look up the quote, but he said in about, oh, basically after rave, probably about 92ish, he said that rave, acid house, etc., was the last genre of music to challenge, would be the last genre of music to challenge the status quo. And what will now challenge the status quo isn't the music itself, but the way the music is listened to, or the way the music is consumed. And he said that in about 92. Um, and he's absolutely right, because that's exactly what's happened. And where we used to get really excited about so and so's put out a new record, now everyone's getting excited about. Have you seen that? Have you seen this? Have you heard that? It's like just that excitement is still there, that momentum is still there. Um, Removing the barrier to entry has meant there's fuckloads more um, than there used to be, but people are still breaking through. It's still there. Um, and I'm not trying to be. I mean, and the Spotify thing is complicated because in reality, what Spotify are doing by using playlists and by algorithmic playlists is they're actually inflating the numbers on stuff. So they're getting stuff more plays than it would have got anyway to make themselves, look like or be like um, a more valuable company because obviously they're going to answer to their stockholders. Um, so they're kind of, they're pushing the numbers by pushing stuff on playlists, by using algorithmic playlists, by suggesting stuff because the more plays they can get for the content they've got, the better it looks for them. Um, but then anyone with the old paradigm is kind of looking at it going, well, I've just had X, whatever, I just had 500,000 plays. Where's my money? Especially on the writer side, obviously, which is, a problem that definitely needs to be solved.
Let's talk about hope. You,
Let's,
you and Steve. Um,
yeah.
when did the idea come about?
Well, I'm gonna tell you. So after about 3 years with Lakota, the thing I really liked about the job more than anything was running the label. So the Lakota label, we had 7 releases, of which Timo was one or two. Um, and I realized I wanted to leave to start a label. Um, and I just bought a house, and decided to leave Lakota, to start a label, and I needed a name for it, and I realized that what I needed was hope. So that's why it's called Hope. And Steve came on at Lakota as a press guy. So he joined in the last year I was there. And I said, I want to start this soon. Do you want to come with me? And he was like, yeah, right, let's do it. And that was it. And then I just took the artists that we'd already done Starecase stuff on Lakota. We'd already done Timo stuff on Lakota. Had we already done General Midi? I don't think so. We've done a few other bits and pieces though. And I thought, well, if I could do that there, I can do that here. So it's as simple as that, really. And then Steve had the foresight and the vision of helping it develop into a management company. Because the initial idea was that Steve would come on to do the promo in the press. It was the A&R side that really interested me. And the DJing side. And we just cracked on from there, and it became obvious pretty quickly that our future lay the management side and not the label side, partly due to the way the Timo Maas project, but Timo himself, just exploded suddenly. It's suddenly, none of us saw it coming. We could all pretend that, we all had some genius plan. Truth is, he did a remix for As You Did a Bass, who was a Hamburg trance guy. And he did it off his own back because they were mates or something. I think they did it for 1,500 Deutschmark. And they rejected the mix. And that mix then became Ubik, the Timo Maas single. And so Martin was so hacked off at the fact that they rejected this mix, which had taken him months to do, that he basically knocked something out in about 3 hours, which was the As You Did a Bass mix. I heard it and decided it sounded like Flat Eric, and I didn't really get it. And we just moved on. That was that. It came out and nobody cared. And then about, I don't know, X months later, it was suddenly on TV on a Speed Garage compilation. And literally within about 2 days, the phones exploded, and that was that. And it's such an iconic piece of music. And I wish I could pretend that I knew it was an iconic piece of music at the time, but I didn't.
Hey, we live and learn.
You live and learn. And Timo and I were touring America around this time a lot as DJs, and it just steamrolled the shit out of everything. It was just like, oh my God, it became the ultimate, I don't know how Martin and Timo did it. I don't know the technical side, but I do know at the time no one had really heard anything like that before, in the way that it sort of slowed down and sped up in the middle, and yeah, it's just tough. But literally, they knocked it out really quickly, angry and pissed off that they rejected the previous mix, which just goes to show sometimes when you don't think about stuff, when you're just full of rage and emotion, sometimes the best things can happen, can't they?
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, like it was a hit in the Speed Garage realm of things, and
Well, that they broke it. No one else was playing it.
Yeah,
no one was playing it.
All of a sudden, everyone from Carl to
there's no Germans playing it, and that's partly because it was a 4-track EP that the Bazida Duos put out, and I think it was the second track on side B. But there was no one in Germany playing it, because no one in Germany played breaks in those days. They just couldn't get their heads around it. So it just developed an entire life of its own in a completely different universe to the one we were in, and then just came knocking at the door at some point. And then I think As You Did a Bass did a vocal version of it and ended up on top of the pops. It was kind of relentless. It never stopped. But in the meantime, we were putting out a load of stuff of Timo's. We were doing Timo tracks with Bush. We were doing Timo tracks on Future. We were doing. There were just so many labels that had released on, and we were releasing on. Like every 6 to 8 weeks, there'd be something else, either under his own name or under a pseudonym, and it all had this kind of dirty funk thing, but a real emotionality to the melody, which was the thing that we were kind of, well, certainly Timo and I were searching for instinctively and never really found it. And then we found it in his music, basically. And then we put out an album on Hope called Music for the Masses, which is like a mixed CD of all the stuff that he'd done in the past, just to help join the dots because people still hadn't quite put it all together. Yeah, and then that and a Z database, and off it went, you know.
Well, we were talking, before, you said you wanted Hope to be like the middle ground between, musical genres. And obviously, it was like the darker side of music. Did you, like, obviously you set out to do that, and was it like, were you a Breaks fan before that as well?
Not massively. I wasn't a huge Breaks fan. I think it was also a reaction to where clubs were, because you've got to remember that most of the mainstream but underground clubs, the Renaissances or whatever, were really dressy and glammy, and you had to wear certain things to get in, and lots of pianos, and it was all exactly what directly or indirectly acid house and rave had tried to knock off its pedestal in the first place. So it all started to become like a big glammy night out. And personally, that's exactly what I wasn't looking for. And So I don't think it was too much of a conscious thing. It was a reaction to what the options were, and the options were basically that, or the other option was like Lost, or these like really uber cool techno nights that, from my perspective at the time, as a clubber, were just too up their own arse, and I was just like, oh, this is all just so fucking serious, and but there's no fun in it. I was like, I want the fun from here, but I don't want any of the glamour. I still want to have a laugh. And there was all these other emerging things. Obviously, there was the kind of the Liberator, Chris Liberator, and all his boys doing this massive screechy acid thing, which was a laugh, but it was really on top and just properly, whoa, you know. And I kind of just wanted bits, or we all wanted bits of all those different things put together, but just to be really inclusive for the people who are coming as well, you know. So yeah, that was the logic of it. I didn't know anything about the prog labels that existed at the time when we started. I had no idea about them. My influence label wise was Rising High Records, because I was sleeping on a mate's floor at Tufnell Park Halls of Residence in about 1990. And I met Casper at the bar there, who was also sleeping on a mate's floor at Tufnell Park Halls of Residence, because neither of us, and we met. This is pre-Rising High, and we built a friendship. And then Rising High happened, and I just loved the way it looked, and I loved the way that every time I put something out, it didn't sound anything like what it put out a month previously. And I was like, oh, this is the vibe. I like this. I mean, the Rising High catalogue, half of it is hard to listen to, but it just, it was always a surprise. And that's kind of what I wanted to achieve with Hope. I just wanted each one to be different. Didn't want to build a groove or be the same thing, or, I didn't want to be prog. I've never liked being part of a tribe or a genre or a vibe or I don't know why, it just has always been that way, I suppose. And that was the logic in the Hope thing, was just to have a label that released stuff that I liked and I thought was quality, and that passion would translate into other people liking it, which is obviously kind of what happened.
Speaking of Casper Pound, Still to this day, one of my favorite remixes of his is Union Jack, Two Full Moons and a
I'm
Trout.
going to have that played at my funeral.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
I used to end my sets with it, sort of mid 90s. It's just, I don't know how much he was involved in that record because I think most of it was a guy called Lawrence, who was in Friend, Lovers and Family. I
Mhm.
don't know if you remember them. Um, that's what someone told me, and I have no idea whether that's true or not. Um, but Casper was definitely a man who wasn't in the studio much, especially as he continued going down a kind of drug route a lot. But I'm sure a lot of the ideas came. I mean, whatever. I'm not trying to be critical of him or anything, but that's definitely a group effort. But it is the most phenomenal piece of, because again, the way it starts and what it does, it just has just with a hi hat and the piano, and then stops. It's the silence in it that is the biggest thing. It just stops, then it's just silent, and just watch the dance floor react to it every time. Like, oh, it stopped. Oh no, it started again. Oh no, it's something else. Or I put on a night in Bristol with Kid Paul. I don't know if you remember him. He retired from DJing after that. He couldn't deal with it. He was a Berlin DJ. Kid Paul wrote. He did a remix of Cafe Del Mar, which was the first track on IQ Records, long before Hacktan did his 3-in-1 remix of it. And he finished with that record. So this is in Bristol in '92, and the crowd just stood still. They couldn't get their heads around it. And he looked at me afterwards and said, "Oh, they're not ready for this." And I have to admit, I didn't think I was ready for it at the time when I first heard it. I was just like, "This is really odd." It took time for it to sink in, and it is, yeah, it's one of those tunes that you can't. Yes, I am. Yeah, my plan is to have it played at my funeral. It is probably a bit long to have played at a funeral, but maybe at the wake or something.
Yeah, it's that on Cosmic Babies, Heaven's Tears.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Just, when you brought up Kid Paul, I immediately thought of Cosmic Baby because I know
Yeah,
that those two have worked together. But
yeah,
I, I I think Cosmic Baby was way ahead of his time. I mean, you
he
know,
was. I think. Yeah,
a lot of people were saying he was the Amadeus of electronic music. Um,
he was. There's a lot of those guys who, because it became like everything. When that all started, when everything started, it was such a free for all, wasn't it? And it took a while. Eventually, things bed down into genres, and everyone's got to be like this. And it doesn't matter whether you're a German techno DJ or a UK drum and bass DJ. The rules started to be applied to what you can play and how you should sound. And those early days, those rules just didn't. They weren't there. You know. And to this day, one of my favorite DJs is Nick Warren because that's how he was. He was like he just roll in and play stuff, and everything he played was amazing, but it just didn't quite fit and that's what I loved about him, and I just fell in love with him and his music and everything. Just around that time, I was at Lakota long before I worked there, and he played Hard Floor Experience. It was the first time I'd heard it, and I just thought I lost my mind completely. I go and find him and find out what it was. And yeah, those days when the DJs had this power and that freedom to be, and some still do, some still stick to it. People like Carl, they just have a presence. If Carl turned out and played a load of electro, you'd still dance your ass off to it. Um, and that has to be the dream as a DJ, to be in that position where you have that charisma and that sensibility to be able to just turn up with, you know, whatever you think is right and fit without it having to fit into all these tiny little boxes. And that was the logic of Hope. That's a super long answer. But
well, it's a great answer. I love that answer.
great.
It's an honest answer.
Yeah.
That's like I said, in the beginning, I bought 99% of Hope
Which
records.
one was your favorite?
I
Because I
like
still don't know which one's my favorite.
Grey Area, Gravity.
Yeah. Yeah.
The hybrid remix
Oh yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah,
when Hybrid were like
yeah,
everything they
yeah.
touched was gold dust. Um, I do love Nick Warren's Devil's Elbow,
Oh yeah, that was lovely. I really like that.
and also Nick's remix of Summertime Sadness.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Because it was something different that I'd not heard
Yeah,
from Nick. I mean, obviously, back in the like Massive Attack days DJing for them, uh, I'd never heard him like produce remix something so down tempo, and it took me off guard, and I was like, holy shit, this
yeah,
is badass.
yeah,
Because I love Lana Del Rey, uh,
yeah,
I think she's great. She rides on her own horse, you know what I mean?
yeah. She does totally.
But the remix was just
Oh, that's brilliant. That's
stand up.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't go towards like the norm. Somebody might say a Timo record. I like to just kind of it's what spoke to me at the time.
yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad it did. Yeah,
But
yeah.
what about yourself?
Because I know we were at the time. We were like, oh, I can't remember exactly how it came about. We had the chance to remix it. So a lot of our clients in the Red Light Electronic division remixed that record, the Summertime Sadness, including Cedric Gervais, who got a Grammy for it.
Hmm.
We ended up doing about 5 different mixes from 5 of our clients. And I remember Nick at the time and probably me were like, we were kind of 50-50 on whether we should even allow it out kind of thing. It was like, it was like, oh. So I'm glad it resonated. Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
dub mix. The dub mix is the one
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. It's lovely. Yeah. Well
You
done. All right. Good.
just took it down another.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Liam, put you on the spot then. What's
Yeah.
one of your
There's a
favorite?
bunch of, I have handful of favorites. One is the Funkin' for Hope in New York mix of Der Shiba, Timo Maas, which was the B side, which allegedly the story goes, we put that out. So that's Hope 8, is it? Yeah, I think so. Or 7, 8, I think. So we put that out within a year and a bit. Allegedly, the Plump DJs who were playing Bristol they were playing the Blue Mountain. I wasn't there, so this is just what someone told me. Clutching it, going, we found our sound. And because, again, it's a breaks record, but it's such a, like, what the fuck going on here? It's one of those breaks records that I think we were the first label. I don't know. I feel like, I remember people being really surprised when we did it. I think we were the first label to do prog on one side and breaks on the other. And a few of us in the collective, mainly Paul from Staircase, who also became General MIDI, he was like a big breaks guy. Um, uh, and so that definitely, and also back to Paul and Eels and their alias Deep Cover, Beatstalker. And again, the breaks mix of that, the General MIDI mix of that is astonishingly good. One of the Brother Brown mixes of Film Palast, I Want. We had endless amounts of them, and I can't remember which one I really loved the most. And I'm not even sure it's around digitally, or someone's probably uploaded it to YouTube somewhere. Grey Area, Humanist, which oddly enough is another breaks record.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, Jan Driver, Drive By. There's a Timo did a mix of that, which I think was another breaks thing, wasn't it? So
Hmm.
maybe I like more breaks than I believe. Should I turn the light on because it's quite dark for you?
Ah, no, you're all good. I can see
You're
you.
right. I don't know if people have watched this, whether they I've just sit in the dark, a shouting old man in the dark. But uh, I loved all this tracks. I was excited. Oh, Ariane Eternity, James Holden. Fuck, that was a good record.
Yeah, another one that's
Holy shit.
James Holden's another one that's just was way
Yeah,
its time. I mean, his Border Community label was just
yeah,
good
yeah,
God. you know.
But we were lucky enough to kind of get him at the start before he'd worked out what he really wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that record was exceptional. We had a sub label which didn't last very long, called Polyester.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a Pascal Fies record on that, Sonic Infusion reformatted. That's also one of my all-time favorites. It's amazing to, it's just amazing when you get the opportunity to think of something and then have the freedom to be able to make it happen, you know?
Well, it's also great too because it's quality over quantity. I think
Yeah.
with your label, and a lot of the tracks you can still play today, and the kids will come up and go,
What's that?
that new, and you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
"Oh,
yeah.
that's 30 years old," and I'm sure that's got to make you like proud, because the production levels were always spot on.
They were, and so much of that was based around Martin Butterish and Eels and Staircase, who really knew their onions. Um, and and then we picked up Max Graham slightly after that, who then developed his sound. Um, we had a little period in the middle, I think, that was a bit shaky. But then it sort of picked up again. I tell you who I love, was one of the last people I signed to the label before I handed it over to Nick Warren, was Tom Glass,
Mm.
Polish guy.
Mm.
And we put an album out of his. There's some amazing tracks. There's one called Naive. One called, I think, A Lot of Little Things. He was brilliant, and he was literally at the time. I mean, this is again obviously a long time ago. He was just some kiddie from rural Poland who had practically zero equipment, and he just had this emotionality and this feel that, I think if he'd have been, if he'd have lived, if he'd have come out of Brooklyn, or he'd have come out of Berlin, or he'd have come out of somewhere else, he'd be so much bigger, because it was just beautiful, simple but cutting edge, kind of melodic. It was beautiful stuff. Really, the Tom Glass stuff I'm particularly proud of. I haven't spoken to him or seen him or anything for a long time, but on the off chance he's listening, hello Tom. And then Nick went on and signed a shitload of absolute classics and bangers and stuff. And at that point, I kind of realized I couldn't manage DJs and be a DJ myself, or not push to be a professional DJ myself. And I was already, I don't know, 36, 35 by this point. I was like, oh, maybe I'll just go behind the scenes. And so we got Nick involved. And obviously, you have to be, if you're A&Ring stuff like that, you have to be out in the clubs all the time, don't you? Have to be championing it and doing your thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I mean, even the DJing thing, I still don't know how like the older lads do it. The Sashas, the Digweeds, the Carl Cox, get on a plane, get off, go to the club, get back on a plane. It's kind of a young man's thing. It's
Well, it's so funny, isn't it? Because the whole logic of it at the time, or this is the way I'd understood it, was let's see how fucked we can get, and then let's see how long we can hold a mix for at the same time. It was like a challenge, like an Olympic sport. Um, and it killed me. I mean, it hollowed me out in the end. I was just like, oh, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. And I settled down and, found a wife and had some kids. But nowadays it's such a different discipline, because everyone is generally so straight. Everyone's doing yoga and Pilates, and has understood that if you're going to spend 7 hours in a club, playing records, you have to be. I work with Arm nowadays, and Christian from Arm, he he plays 3 4 hour sets maybe. He aims to have a 20,000 step count, which he achieves during his set. So that's the mentality. That's how it's changed, and he's not a young man. So yeah, I mean, it's, you can do it, but you just have to be really disciplined. And I certainly wasn't disciplined. Holy shit.
Well, and again, back in the day, there wasn't social media, so you could get up to, having
Yeah, well, exactly. There was no documentary evidence of anything.
yes,
And as such, it didn't exist. So there we are.
yeah,
Occasionally, people had those cameras that you could send off and get developed. The little ones.
mm.
And there are some photos somewhere, but I've never seen them, thankfully, and no one's scanned them and put them online. So I think we're good.
You probably don't want to see them.
I
That's
don't know. I don't think I do.
yeah,
No.
yeah.
Uh, there's a couple way back on my Facebook from where just it's not pretty.
That's when things have changed. When people have that DJs have the Apple watches. They're doing the counting the steps, counting
Yeah,
probably calories, how much calories
yeah,
lost,
yeah, totally. What
sweating.
you're eating is so important.
Yeah.
You know.
It's just a much changed world. Well, I want to obviously talk about football. Do you
Okay,
do you have a specific team?
I do have a specific team, Bayern Munich.
Ah, all
Bit of
right.
Bristol City on the side, but I can't really claim to know exactly who everybody is. But I do occasionally go. But no, I'm a Bayern fan.
Yeah. Who was your favorite Bayern player?
Um, Probably Schweinsteiger, although Müller. I mean, that era, the kind of Müller, Schweinsteiger, Lahm era was amazing. I didn't like sport when I was younger, and I didn't like football when I was younger. And um, I didn't like the mentality that came with football when I was at school. I didn't like the tribalism of it. I couldn't fucking play it anyway. Um, I didn't like anything to do with it. Um, but what I did do was occasionally watch the World Cup, um, because I always wanted Germany to win, and which was particularly tough in '96 in the Euros, when before a club night there was about 50 of us watching England Germany in the Euros, and I was the only one celebrating, and then many people literally didn't fucking speak to me all night. Um, and I was happy with just World Cup. It was fine. 2010, I watched the World Cup, and it was a new young German team, Özil and Müller and all those boys. And I didn't want it to end. I was like, oh, fuck. I'm going to have to start watching club football now. Um, and I lived in Munich for a while as a teenager. It was quite a formative part of my life. And so I just started supporting Bayern Munich. And I've been doing that ever since. Um, my youngest also supports Bayern Munich, but feels he needs a Premier League team, but he can't make up his mind which one. Um, but yeah, I've become quite fixed on the Bayern thing now, and I've sort of followed them quite avidly. I've seen them a few times when I get the opportunity, which isn't as often as I'd like. Um, and But I do occasionally go down to Ashton Gate to watch City play. Um, but my youngest is a Rovers guy, so he refuses to go to Ashton Gate to watch City play. But I sometimes have to go to my father-in-law or something. Yeah,
I like how Bundesliga's ran. I really do. I like
yeah,
the clubs. The supporters have a say,
yeah,
because I'm a Liverpool supporter, but I just
yeah,
don't I just don't like the greed that's happening in
yeah,
the Premier League and the La Liga. Obviously Real and Barca are the ones that run that league.
yeah.
It's just Bundesliga is a bit more refreshing. I've started to watch quite a number of matches now, and the support over there is just amazing.
Mental. Yeah, it's
All the
crazy. Yeah,
pyro, it's like going to a
yeah,
club. You know,
yeah. It is. Yeah, yeah,
DJs.
yeah, yeah.
That's like post match, pre match, half time. You get it all. It's
Yeah,
good to
yeah,
see, and the big TiVos that they do.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I wish Bayern all the luck until we if
until it's a Bayern
until
Liverpool game, and then yeah,
yeah,
no, I understand.
and
Yeah,
I hope we smash you.
and that is often the case, so that's fine.
But yeah,
It's yeah, and the Bundesliga is interesting because obviously it does have all these very different perspectives on club ownership and the 50+1 rule and the
Mhm.
money and that kind of thing. And there was a big backlash on the Leipzig situation because obviously they were privately funded. Um, and it'd be interesting to see how long it manages to survive um, in that format, because I suspect things will probably change. I don't know. Um, but yeah, I really like it. And football when we were young was just a different thing. I used to get beaten up and stuff on the streets of Bristol by Rovers heads or City heads who would accuse me of supporting one or the other. And I just couldn't understand why anyone would get that excited about a football team and be willing to fight for it. It just seems incomprehensible to me why anyone would get that, you know, invested in it. And I didn't really understand the socio kind of cultural aspects of it. And just it was just alien to me. But then eventually the penny dropped, and yeah, yeah,
Well, I think when you're younger, it's life or death when you're watching a match.
yeah,
If you lose, it ruins your week. But I mean, I used to want to throw stuff out the window. Used to want to smack anything uh, that was around me when I was young. And it was just immature. I think as you get older, if Liverpool lose within an hour, I've got my four girls that snap me out of being an arsehole.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
just get on with
yeah,
it. You just like,
yeah,
we lost. There's always next week. But when you're
yeah.
young, next
When
week,
you're young, maybe that isn't there. Yeah, you're right. I mean,
yeah,
you must be delighted with the way things are going at the minute for Liverpool.
I do. I mean, after Klopp left, who
You'd
I
never think that would be topped, would you?
no, I mean, I love that man. Not just because
Yeah,
of football, but because he got Scousers, he got the city. Uh,
yeah,
I
yeah,
really appreciate that. Like, he's a man I'd love to go for quite a few bevies with, and
yeah, yeah.
not talk about football, just talk about life.
No, he's like the sort of guy you want as an uncle, isn't he? He's got
Yeah,
that sort of vibe, isn't he?
yeah.
I
You want
remember when he
to?
started in Liverpool, he did like a video. I don't know where it was, maybe on YouTube channel or something. And his English was still a bit broken. I don't know if you know Dortmund as a city, but it's an old coal mining city and a bit rough around the edges. And he's walking through the streets of Liverpool and goes, "Oh, I like it. It's the same kind of ugly as Dortmund." That's a brilliant approach, I thought.
And Andy, he went out for a pint. The first,
Yeah,
the first after he signed, he went to a pub
yeah,
and he just integrated himself with the
yeah,
community.
yeah,
And when he left, I mean, when last January, when the January before when he said, he's leaving, it broke my heart. I mean,
yeah, I bet.
you just don't think beyond that. I mean, like when I first went, Kevin Keegan was my childhood hero.
Yeah, yeah,
But a year later, he left, and I was
yeah,
devastated. But then
yeah, yeah,
Kenny came, you know.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
it's a cycle, and I never expected Slot to come in and do what he did.
He's
Uh,
done a phenomenal job.
he has, and he's a
Yeah,
tactician. I
yeah,
love, he's totally different. Like I didn't want another Klopp. There's only one Klopp,
yeah,
and he's
yeah.
done it so differently. He basically had the same team, but he tweaked it, and we've had less injuries. And
Yeah,
I'm just looking forward to this season.
yeah, it'd be great.
It's
With
going to be.
Florian Wirtz as well, you'll be
Oh
absolutely
God,
golden, mate.
yeah. I mean, you know how social media is. They after two games, he's only played two games in the Prem,
Yeah, yeah, and everyone's like, "Oh my God."
and people are slating him like it. It's because of his price tag.
Yeah,
That's why they slate him. I mean, he's a human being that's moved to another country.
yeah,
It's a different league. It's more physical. The Premier League is
yeah,
more physical than
yeah,
Bundesliga.
100%.
it's going to take him time to kind of get the rhythm. He's in a new team, and we've got four new players, four
Yeah,
starters
yeah,
who need to gel. We've been lucky that we won, our first couple of games, and I'm just looking forward to it.
yeah. It'd be great.
That's all you can do these
Yeah,
days.
expectations are so high nowadays, right off the bat, aren't they? It's just that's ridiculous. There's no, and it's the same for musicians. It's
Mhm.
the same. There's no room left to experiment and just try stuff out. Or people feel there isn't.
Yeah.
There should be, and there is if you're willing to make it. But people just expect top results right off the bat, and then they make a snap decision on whether you're any good or not.
Yeah, or they expect, the chart topping album that you had, they expect
Yeah,
chart topping
yeah,
album part two,
yeah.
while the artist is wanting to go in a different,
Different. Don't do something else. Yeah,
yeah.
totally. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I
There'd be
respect
no
that.
kind of U2 if they were signed now because it took them three albums to really lock in. And there'd be no that sort of thing is just crazy because that immediacy of yeah, no, no, right, and then move on next thing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you
Dude, it's been a delight. Thank you very much for letting me rattle on.
on. I always say this to me guests though, an hour goes by so quickly when
It
you
does. I didn't realize that an hour had gone by, but I realize it has now. I'm looking at the clock. Yeah.
when you're talking about things that you care about, things that you feel passionate about, is just
Yeah.
it's just great. But um,
Yeah.
where can people like if they want to obviously Beatport and Spotify, but do you still have your SoundCloud up?
Yeah, my SoundCloud, in terms of my podcast and the radio show I did and that sort of thing, and there's a couple of old screeching techno trance mixes on there as well, and a few other bits and pieces. So that's just Leon Alexander. I'm on Instagram as Leon.Alexander. Um, and look, I want to thank you for reaching out because I said at the start before you hit record, I'm genuinely surprised and flattered that you have any idea who I am. So that's a wonderful thing. And it has been a long time since since we started all since it all kind of started to work and started to connect. And it's only sometimes when you look back, you realize, oh yeah, I've done quite a lot actually. Because the drive is always to go to what's next, what's new, how are we doing that, where am I going there, you know. And actually, I realised that I'm almost 60, that probably achieved quite a lot already. It's
Yeah,
nice. And
there
it's
you
nice
are.
you had Justin on because the thing I remember most about Justin is that I used to get mistaken for him a lot about 30 years ago. And I always really liked him, and I haven't had any contact with him for a long time. So it was nice to see him. And you got some really great guests. There's a bunch of things I need to dig in on your channel, people you've recorded. It's really interesting, and well done for putting it all together, mate.
Yeah, it's just people seem to like it. The guests seem
Yeah,
to feel like they can open up, which is that
yeah,
biggest
yeah.
compliment I think I can get is the guest is like, you've let me speak.
Well,
I mean,
look, everyone, in kind of in theory, everyone enjoys talking about themselves, and if you put them in a comfortable enough position to do that, which clearly you're very good at doing, then the rest just flows, isn't it?
hmm yeah, and
Yeah.
I've just again, uh, everyone that I've had on is literally a part of my musical like landscape.
Yeah.
Like I've bought your music, seen you DJ, I've you know musicians, I've gone to see the concerts and stuff. So I just I can't really bring someone on that I don't know anything about.
No,
You know,
no, I understand that totally.
it
Yeah.
just wouldn't work. And I mean,
No,
I
no.
know some people can do it because they get cue cards by their
Yeah.
whatever manager. I can't do that. If I don't know
No,
anything about you, then
no, no.
it's not going to seem real. So it's my pleasure to have a person like yourself on. It just is, and again, I always say like, my I started like my football one. I have a Liverpool one. I started that in COVID because I was bored shitless.
Yeah, yeah, right.
My missus was like, "You have got to do something.
Do something.
Driving me nuts. But then, there's only so much football you can talk about, like
Yeah.
views and review shows. I bring on ex-players, but something was missing, like the soul was missing. And again, my missus was like, well, a bunch of DJs and producers. Why don't you do a
Yeah.
music
Brilliant.
football one?
Yeah.
Because there's loads of DJs out there that only get asked musical questions.
Yeah.
They must get bored shitless being asked
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
question
Yeah. Yeah.
over and
Yeah.
again. There's more to life than just DJing and making music.
Yeah.
So
100%. Absolutely.
a light bulb
Yeah.
moment went off, and
Yeah.
been doing this
Cool.
a year. So yeah, but I want to say thank you everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, put your notifications on. As I always end, I always say, check out new music, but also check out the older music. There's tracks out there 30 years old that will blow your absolute mind. And a lot of it to me was on Hope Records. Uh,
Oh,
and again, we live in a crazy world right now. Music can kind of take you away from that. But, turn to your mates, turn to your family, tell them you love them, but most importantly, stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
thank you very much, Daz.